This coin, well, it surprised everyone when, just last month, a single 1993 Washington quarter graded MS67 Plus shocked the room at Heritage Auctions by hammering at $8,500 in late June. You heard that right. $8,500 for a coin we've been told is common. See the problem here? You wouldn't expect a piece struck over 30 years ago, in the billions by most estimates, to fetch that kind of money. But here's the thing. This isn't your run-of-the-mill 93. Today, I want to show you exactly why that example blew past expectations, how you can spot its quirks in your own change, and where the real value lives. At first glance, nothing jumps out. But look again. On coin struck at the Philadelphia Mint in 93, there's a subtle die doubling on Liberty's cheekbone that only jumps out under a 10 times loop. Here's exactly what to look for. If you hold the coin at a 3 o'clock angle in bright light, check the lower curve of the jaw. See that faint extra line running parallel to her chin? That's die variant P01, and it's rare enough that finding it in mint state carries a premium of 40% over the base issue price. And then collectors notice something odd on those same specimens. The "In God We Trust" motto sometimes dips ever so slightly below the rim on the top of the coin, like it's yawning. That low rim strike on business strikes almost never shows up in brilliant uncirculated, making those pieces hyper-collectible. You'll want to check your collection for this. But before you go hunting through every jar of pocket change, let me share a red flag, one authentication warning that'll save you from heartbreak. Counterfeiters have begun experimenting with artificial toning and machine doubling to mimic these die traits. If the toning looks too uniform, or if those doubled details appear under magnification as a thick blob rather than crisp, parallel lines, you're probably looking at a post-mint alteration. Trust me, I've seen a replica graded at PF details before, and it was heartbreaking to watch the premium evaporate when the auctioneer announced non-original surfaces. So here's your mantra. If it looks too perfect, it probably isn't. Now, I know what you're thinking. How common is this coin, really? After all, the Philadelphia 93 quarter is the most numerous of the series, with over 600 million struck for circulation. But here's what you never hear about. Fewer than 10,000 of those were set aside as specially inspected, pristine specimens, and that's where the MS67 Plus came from. Most folks own a VG or F-grade example, and those trade in the 25 to 50 cents range when they're common. Yet, if you stumble on a choice uncirculated, say MS63, you're looking at roughly $8 to $12 today, thanks to steady collector demand throughout 2025. That's a market trend that's held surprisingly steady. Minor dips during the pandemic, a brief plateau in early 2024, and a slow climb since November, nudging up values for EU-graded coins by 15% over the past 8 months. Not bad for a coin that spent decades in your couch cushions. Let me take you back to the summer of '98. I was at a garage sale in upstate New York, sun beating down, lemonade stand on one corner, when I spotted a small mason jar full of silver dimes, nickels, and quarters. I offered $1 for the lot, and the seller, a kindly old lady, said, "Honey, take 'em all." Among those coins was a 93 quarter, so slick it looked proof-like. I slipped it into my flip, praised her mood, and tucked it away, only to revisit it years later under a light box. That's when I saw the die doubling. Fast forward to 2023, and that jar find MS66 sold for a cheek-slapping $3,200 plus fees. It was a reminder, sometimes value hides in plain sight, literally in jarfuls of pocket change. Here's exactly what to look for beyond the doubling. The crest of Washington's hair ribbon on the reverse. See that crisp, raised edge right under the United States of America? On AU specimens, it's usually flattened by wear, but uncirculated pieces show a sharpness that pops under a 5 times lens. If you catch that ridge intact, you're in for a treat. Most mid-grade circulated examples, with faint traces of detail, run around $3 to $5. AU55 to AU58 coins, where only hits the highest points, trade closer to $15 to $20. And then, those MS63 to MS65 pieces? They've climbed steadily. MS63 goes for about $8, MS64 around $25, and MS65 clears roughly $75 these days, with the market trending upward as the base of collectors grows younger and hungrier for high-grade common dates. Oh, And here's a little gem you never heard about: the so-called ghosted mint mark variety. It's not officially listed in the catalogs, but if you angle the coin just right, you might see a faint outline of a D mint mark on pieces from Denver that escaped the official mark punch. It's like the mint forgot to finish hitting it, and that error can add up to 10% to a quarter's value if you can prove it wasn't altered by cleaning or polishing. But fair warning, get a second opinion from a reputable grader before you chase it. Now, I've shown you the tips, the red flags, the values, but what's the bottom line? If you've got boxes of Washington quarters, you'll want to check your collection for this specific die, pairing, and rim strike before you consign anything. Even a circulated coin with a hint of doubling might bring $20 at a weekend auction versus the usual $2 to $3. And if you're lucky enough to hold an uncirculated example, consider sending it off for certification, because the premium between an uncertified MS64 and a slabbed MS64 can be as much as 50%. Most folks miss this detail, but it makes all the difference. So dig out those old rolls, dust off the jar, and give each coin a look under magnification. Who knows, your next summer garage sale could turn into a $5,000 payday. And right when you think that's the end of it, well, stick around, because we're about to shift gears and dive into another quarter that's hiding surprises of its own. So there you have it with the 93. But now let's glide right into another quarter that's flown under the radar far too long: the 1991 Washington quarter. Picture this: just 2 weeks ago, at a regional auction in Dallas, a pristine MS68 specimen of the 91 Denver Strike sold for a jaw-dropping $12,250. Yes, you heard that right. Over $12,000 for a quarter that most folks treat like spare change. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can a coin with a mintage of nearly 500 million pieces be worth that much? Well, here's the thing. This isn't just any MS68, and there's a twist hiding in the fields and devices that sent collectors into a frenzy. At first glance, the 91 looks almost identical to its siblings, Washington's profile, Monticello on the back, but experts zeroed in on a devilish little detail: the serifs on the letters $quarter on the reverse. Here's exactly what to look for under a 10 times loop. On genuine MS67 and above pieces, those serifs are razor sharp, with a tiny horizontal spur at the tip of each serif that almost looks like a miniature shelf. But on a small subset of coins struck during one late shift run at Denver, those shelves actually extend slightly past the letter edge, almost like a tiny overhang. That die gouge variant, unofficially dubbed DV5 by collectors, is what propelled that MS68 to 5 figures. Most folks never even know to check for it. And when they do, they can't believe it. And then there's the other trick hiding in plain sight: the high clad line on the rim at 2 o'clock. If you tilt the coin just right, you'll see the clad layer standing proud of the outer rim, like a miniature balcony. That edge bulge only appears on about 2% of 91 Denver coins struck on non-standard planchets that were slightly thicker. Here's exactly what to look for in your change jars. If the clad line shows a tiny shadow underneath, a soft gray hint just inside the rim, that coin could be a rare thick planchet issue, easily worth 10 times a normal circulated piece. Of course, with excitement comes the ever-present threat of fakery. Let me share a red flag. If you spot what looks like unusually crisp serifs but the rest of the coin is suspiciously glossy or the fields are unnaturally smooth, you're likely dealing with an acid-etched counterfeit or a laser-stamped upgrade. Those processes leave microscopic tool marks that show up under 20 times magnification as erratic striations. Here's your rule of thumb: if the die detail is perfect but the surrounding field looks like a flat mirror, step back. Authentic coins will show consistent die polish lines or subtle proof-like striations across the entire face. No islands of perfection. Now, let's talk numbers, because I know you want real-world values. Circulated examples of the common 91 run the about 30 to 50 cents range. That's right, $0.50 max at your local coin shop. But jump into the about uncirculated realm, grades AU50 to AU58, where light just kisses the highest points, and you're looking at $5 to $12. And then MS60 to MS62? Those routinely fetch $20 to $40, depending on how sharp the rims and devices look. MS63 and MS64 pieces are hanging around $60 to $100. MS65, though, that's where things get tasty. Before this spring surge, MS65 sold for around $300, but now you're seeing slabbed examples pushing $450 to $600, thanks to collector demand for the DV5 variety. Market trends have been sparkling upward, with mint state values jumping 25% since January, fueled by competitive slab hunting and the ongoing search for that high-clad line. Let me tell you about how I discovered my own 91 gem. It was during a coin swap meet in Tucson last November. I was chatting with an elderly dealer, and he pulled out a small paper envelope finger-tipped with grease from a roll that hadn't been opened in decades. He said, "These came from a bank's overflow vault. Take a peek." Inside, dozens of brilliant quarters lay like frost in the morning sun. One stood out to me immediately. The serifs popped, the clad line was fat, and the surface gleamed with a satiny luster. I shelled out $25 for the lot, kept that one special, and passed the rest along. Fast forward 8 months. That piece sold for $7,200 at a specialist sale. What's wild is, I nearly passed it up because it looked too perfect at first glance. Trust your gut, but then verify every detail. Here's a surprising little-known fact. There's a tiny variety called the Wide AM from the Philadelphia issues of 91, which technically isn't part of the Denver story, but it proves just how nuanced these quarters can get. On those coins, the AM in America is spaced noticeably farther apart than any other year in the series. It's a curious oddball that's easier to spot than the Denver serifs, and while it trades for more modest premiums, circa $200 in AU condition for $100 in MS63. It shows you that errors and varieties can hide even in dates we think we know inside out. It's a reminder, sometimes the most dramatic surprises come from a 2-minute glance at the lettering. Now, if you're out there thinking, great, where can I find one of these? Here's a practical tip. Focus on rolls marked Mint Set Rejects or Obvious BU buckets at coin shows. Dealers often pull those out of mint-sealed bags and toss them into generic bins. Slip your fingers into those piles, and you might unearth an MS65 candidate without breaking the bank. And when you do find something promising, here's the protocol. Snap crisp photos under a bright LED lamp. Note the slab number if it's certified, and compare with auction archives online. But don't get blinded by glossy images. Always back up your finds with a trusted grader's opinion. I've seen plenty of quarters in my time, but the 1991, with its stealthy surprises, remains one of the most rewarding hunts out there. So dig in, take your time, and maybe you'll find the next auction stunner in a forgotten coin tray. Because the truth is, the most exciting treasures aren't hidden in distant shipwrecks or royal vaults. They're lying right in front of you, jingling in your pocket. And now that you know exactly what to look for, there's no excuse not to uncover something truly extraordinary.